Okay, we're going to go through the materials and the cuts that you need. I just want to show you. So this is the first section of your material, of the fabric and materials that you need and the sizes for it. So this is going to be section number 1. So this is what you need no matter which version of the Project Keeper you are doing. So front cover, this is going to be my outside exterior cover. This flamingo fabric, you're going to cut it 20 by 13 1/4. You will see that if you are using a directional fabric, a fussy cut, this fabric falls into all of those categories. So you want to take into consideration when you're cutting it, how I wanted the flamingos and the heart centered right on the front cover. So I did fussy cut this, but this is my front cover fabric, 20 by 13 1/4. Then I've got my inside cover fabric is also 20 by 13 1/4. And then, hopefully you're not surprised, the foam that you need, it's the Pellon Flex Foam two-sided fusible fabric interfacing. It's a nice thick foam material. And I use that. The details for it are in your pattern if you want to order some. But this is also measuring 20 by 13 1/4. And the last two pieces that you're going to need for section number 1 is your bias, your quilt binding. So this is 2 1/4 length strips. You need 2 1/4 by at least 75 inches. I went ahead, and this is just a fat quarter that I cut up. I went ahead and I cut 4 strips. So it's going to run me about 80 inches, but you need at least 75 inches for your exterior quilt binding, the Project Keeper binding. And the last thing you're going to need is your flap fabric. Now, I will go into details during the assembly portion of the video to give you all some fussy cutting tips and tricks. You can either just cut a straight up flap. The directions tell you to cut 2 of a square size. I went ahead and I wanted to fussy cut this. So it's a little bit different, but I will show you that later on in the pattern. Okay, let's move on to section 2. Now remember, this is where you get to make the Project Keeper custom. The first section we just went over was the one you're going to need for whatever versions. It's the outside cover, the insides, the binding, and the flap. That you're going to need no matter what kind of guts you put on the inside of your Project Keeper. So here I've got a Project Keeper that's got both one side bobbin side and one side pocket vinyl side. And so now I'm going to show you section 2 materials listed in your pattern, gives you the cut sizes and the quantity needed per bobbin side. So if you just wanted to make a double-sided bottom folio, you need 2 of these. If you're just going to make 2 pockets on both sides, you don't need any of these. But let me show you what you need for section 2. The first thing you're going to need is vinyl strips. We've got vinyl strips. This is a heavy duty vinyl. I have listed in the pattern the brand name specifications of the vinyl that I have. I like to use a high quality thick vinyl. So you need 6 strips. Yep, there's 6. 2 1/4 by 9. The next thing you're going to need is the bias tape binding. This is what you're going to use at the top of these vinyl strips. The next you're going to need is called the strip binding piece, and then the strip binding interfacing. This is 4 by 13 1/4. This is also 4 by 13 1/4. And these are 1 1/2 bindings. Now let me bring back my sample just so I can show you the components of what these ingredients are. Vinyl, obviously this is the vinyl portion right here. The bias binding, I'm going to use my bias binding maker to make the bias binding that's going to go on the top lip of every bobbin pocket. And this is this strip right here. This is what's going to kind of grab and hold the right side justification of the vinyl strips. And I do interface that so it gives it a nice heavy duty hold. So that is section 2 of your materials/cut list. All right, now we're going to go into section 3 of the Project Keeper cut list. Remember, these are the ingredients and the materials you're going to need if you wanted to make a vinyl pocket. The vinyl pocket is a zippered pocket with the vinyl cover, as well as a flap underneath to stick your patterns. So you're going to need, these are the materials and cuts you're going to need per side. So again, if you're doing a 2-sided vinyl pocket, double it. If you're just doing 1-side bobbin, 1-side pocket, you need one of each. So the first thing we've got is the pocket lining fabric. That is what I'm using this parrot fabric for. It measures 9 by 13 and a quarter. The pocket interfacing is the same size. We are going to interface this pocket. The next 2 pieces on there we've got the vinyl. The vinyl is going to be 7.5 by 13 and 1/4. And then we've got the 2 pieces for the zipper attaching on the left and the right of the zipper. This is 4 by 13 and a quarter of both the fabrics, as well as the interfacing, as well as a nice zipper. I always use a longer than needed zipper. It just makes the installation piece easier to do. So let me bring this back over just to clarify again what all these pieces are. So obviously this left and right sandwiching the zipper, that's what this fabric is. We're going to interface it, and then we're going to do a bias fold on it. You'll see that during the assembly instructions. We've also got our vinyl pocket, which is the vinyl flap, and the bird fabric is what you can see underneath the fabric. Now you can see when I did this one, I used the same fabric for my back cover as I did for my pocket. I am not doing that with this one. This pocket is a separate fabric. That is section 3 of your materials and cuts list. Now we're going to assemble the cover of the Project Keeper. So you're going to need 3 pieces of your cuts. You're going to need cut A, which is your front cover, cut B, which is your inside cover, and cut C, which is your Pellon foam fusible interfacing. All of them are cut to the same size. So we're going to take these 3 pieces and kind of make a foam sandwich. So we're going to put our inside cover down first. We're going to put our foam, they're all the same size, so we just line it up. Like I said, we're making a sandwich. Gonna line it up. Perfect. And then we're gonna put our cover on top. And then we're gonna take this over to our ironing board and fuse them all together. If you're not familiar, the fusible interfacing means there is a glue that is attached to the foam on both sides of it that is activated with heat. So we're going to take that over to our ironing board, do a press on both sides until these 3 pieces are fused together. Okay, so we are back and I've got my foam sandwich. My front, my back, and my inside cover are all fused together. Now we're going to work on the flap. I know it's counterintuitive. We're doing the flap first, but because we need to get the front cover's Velcro sewn on before we go any further. So remember, I explained to you guys that I fussy cut my cover. You do not have to fussy cut. So if you did not fussy cut and you're trying to match up patterns, it won't take that long. You can skip this fussy cutting portion of it. But what I've done is I've taken my cover piece, which is your section, your cut piece E, and you're going to take 2 4.5 squares, or you can have 1 4.5 by 9 inch, fold it in half. That's what I have here. And I went ahead and I put a piece of scrap 809 interfacing on it. I know that's not in the pattern, but I just like to give the flap a little bit of extra stability. So if you have some 809 scrap, throw it on the back. just to give your flap a little extra stability. So what I'm doing is I'm matching up where I want my flap to come on to the fabric. Now, if you weren't matching, you would just want to center it up. So you're going to take the center. Here we are. It's 13 1/4. Remember all those 13 1/4. You're going to take your piece of Velcro. I use a Velcro that's about 3.5 inches. So it's almost the whole width of the flap. And I'm going to attach it. Where you're going to attach it depends on the width of your Velcro, depends on all those things, but you're going to line it up so that the flap comes over. The good news is you have extra so that we're assembling it later, you can match this up later. The only thing we're doing right now is attaching the piece that's on the front cover, because once we start assembling the rest, we can't attach it. So we're attaching that one. I usually like to have a nice, it's about 2.5 inch. So it's about a 2 inch, the edge of my Velcro here on the left is 2 inches from the edge of my binder. And so that is what I am going for. So here I am lining up. This one is kind of, I'm using my lineup versus the hardcore measurements because this is where I want this to come in. I want the flap right there. So this is not very scientific. With the Velcro, you can use either side. I like to put the fuzzy side on the front cover just because that's easier. It's a nicer piece to touch. But what we're going to do is we're just going to line it up right here. I am 1.5 from the edge and 4 inches from the top. So take my cover away. I'm going to find those pieces, 1.5 from the edge, 4 inches from the top, right there. I'm going to go grab 2 pins. And all I'm going to do is take this over to my sewing machine and give it a nice sturdy stitch, double stitch it, sometimes even a zigzag stitch, because, you know, this Velcro is going to be under some pressure. It's what's going to be used. It's the workhorse of the Project Keeper. So you want it to hold. So giving this some strength and stability is important. So while you're over there, you can also go ahead and assemble this part of it. If you have 2 inches, if you have one long piece, you're just going to fold. You can see I was folding it this way. Now I'm just going to fold it this way and sew my seams right here on the left and the right. If you had just 2 4-inch squares, you're going to do all 3 sides, and we're going to turn it inside out and then attach the Velcro on the back side. That's it. Okay, so as you can see, I've attached the Velcro to the cover and the flap. And so now we're going to put these pieces aside and we're going to move on to the zipper. We're going to do section 3 first. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of our pieces from section 3. So this is each of the zipper pocket side pieces. So we have our lining fabric, which is the birds, piece J. We have our interfacing, K. So we're going to go ahead and do what we did before. Again, the 809 is fusible on one side only. So you want your shiny side, which is the fusible portion, up. You want to put your pretty fabric down on it. We're going to take that over to the ironing board and attach it. But while we're over there, we're going to do the same thing as well for our piece L and M. We have 2 of these. We have 2 interface pieces as well as 2 of the fabrics. And so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and line these up and attach them all with the interfacing over at the ironing board. Okay, so I'm back from the ironing board and I have attached the 809 interfacing to the pocket cover lining as well. So that was J. And I have attached, this is the zipper binding fabric, the top and the bottom of the zipper. So let me pull out my sample just so you can follow along. Remember, these are what these are. We're creating these that are going to flank the zipper during the installation. So what we're going to do, and I went ahead and I did one. We need to do this for both of them, but I wanted to come and just show you guys over here on the table where the light is better than what I've done. So this These were the same when I went over there, and I attached the 809 to them. And then what I need to do is I need to create basically a bias tape. That is what we're using to sandwich between the zipper. It's a bias tape. So if you're not familiar with what that means or how you do it, let me show you. So we're going to turn this into this, which means it's going to have a nice, pretty, non-raw edge on both sides. Everything that's raw is tucked inside, never to be seen. Nothing is exposed. So what you're going to do with your iron, once this is already done, you're going to fold this in half, give it a good press. Then, once that's pressed, you're going to fold that half into the half, fold this half into the half, and then half them together. And you're going to give it a nice, good, long press while it's heated, still on the ironing board. I bring this over, and I love, this is what is going to save your day. If you don't have this on your ironing board toolbox, the link is down below where you can grab one of these. This is my favorite thing. And so what I was doing, I press it good, and then I put my thing on, my tailor's clapper, right when it's still hotter than Hades. And when it's done, it'll stay, it just, this soaks up the seam. I don't know the magic of a wood block, but really, you won't have the seam trying to open up on its own. It'll stay closed just like it is right there. So you need to do that with both these flaps. You actually can do it 3 times. We will need it in the section 2 part of the bobbin strip. So you will need exactly one of these right here. So if you want to make all 3 at the same time, knock yourself out. Now it's time to assemble the pocket together with the zipper. So let me give you a few tips and tricks for the assembly piece. These are all the pieces we're needed to put it together. Easy as pie, we can do it. So I've got my 2 folded up zipper sandwich bias tape slices ready to go. So what do you want to take into consideration when you're putting this together is so this is the front cover. I like the zipper to zip down and up is closed. So just, I've made that mistake before. Just think it through before you start putting it all together. So again, I like to use a bigger zipper than what is needed. So that way, to be honest with you, I don't change my zipper foot. I don't change the foot of my sewing machine because I'm getting nowhere near the front or the back of the zipper, the top and the bottom of it. And that's what you need it. I use a nice extra wide. I will link down below in the video where I get my zippers. It's from a ZipIt, an Etsy shop. Love it. I like nice chunky zippers because not only are they chunky, they give a nice wide zipper tape, which is another reason why I don't need my zipper foot. So I'm gonna go ahead and I put this on. I want the opening on this side. I want the closed seam on this side of the zipper. So I'm going to go and I'm going to top stitch on my sewing machine right here. Okay, easy. Okay, I'm back from the sewing machine. As you can see, I top stitched right along the top of this top of the zipper, attaching the bias tape zipper frame to the zipper. Your preference on how far away you are, how long your stitch is, totally depends on the size of zipper you're using, the teeth, your just personal preference. The key for this is you want to make sure that you're far enough away that the teeth works, that the zipper works, and that it attaches, that the zipper tape is wide enough that you can grab and securely attach from the top to the bottom. That's the key. So the next thing you're going to do is take your vinyl piece and you're going to slide it right in. And it's going to butt up right inside. Now the vinyl is cut a little big lengthwise because that way we can adjust it when we're doing the final assembly. So you do get the piece cut just a smidge bigger than it needs to, and that's okay because then we'll just trim that extra. It's easier to trim away than it is to add at the end. So all you're going to do right now is stitch right along this line, attaching the bias tape zipper frame to the vinyl. So attaching the vinyl takes a little, if you're new to vinyl, it might be a little tricky at first because the vinyl tries to stick sometimes to the bottom of your sewing machine. So just slow and steady. Sometimes you can also put a piece of washi tape or use a Teflon foot if it sticks and you can't, but just slow and steady and you'll be able to get that stitch line attaching the vinyl to the bottom. So remember, because we had this bias tape built binding, there's no exposed seams at the bottom. So we're almost on our last step. So now we're going to take the 3 components and sandwich it all together. And this is when I'm actually going to pull a clip. As you can see, I'm not a big clip or pin user. I kind of just hold it as I go. But you can always, it's your comfort level, what you're comfortable with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the inside pocket. I'm opening up this edge one. So I'm going to slide that in there. That's sandwiched in. And then I'm going to line it up with my zipper right here. So I'm lining up this last components. Everything's lined up. And I am going to use a couple pins since I've got a couple different layers coming together all at once. So all I'm going to do now is do the same top stitch that I did here, right along here, and all the pieces will be together. And that is how you put together one side of the zipper pocket of the Project Keeper. So this pocket is all ready to go. It's fully interfaced and on the back, so it'll be a nice slide pocket once we do the assembly portion. The zipper's at the top, everything works. I've got the vinyl pocket. It's gonna be great. So if you're doing 2 of these and no bobbin keepers, skip ahead to the assembly portion. I will have chapters down below in the timestamps for the chapters are down below in the video description if you want to skip ahead to the assembly portion because you've got your 2 zipper sides. But if not, and you're ready for the bobbin portion, let's do it. Okay, so I added my little bias tape tutorial that I have kind of inside this video just so you guys could see how that works. I know my pattern tells you you can cut this strip, so it all just depends on your comfort level, your tools, what you've got at your disposal to use. So you can either buy bias tape. You know, bias tape is sold in your big box store near where your zippers are. So you can buy 3/4 inch bias tape already made. It's going to be in a solid color. It's not going to be fun and funky and match, but it's pre-made. So, you know, there's that. Or if you wanted to get the bias tape maker, or if you have it, great. If you get the attachments and you want to make it that way, great. Otherwise, the bias tape that we're making is very similar to what we did before. This little strip, except on a smaller scale. Instead of being 4 inches that we half and half and half, it's 1.5 that we half and half and half. So it's a little tiny on your fingers trying to do it yourself at the iron, but it can be done. So I have bias tape. So this is the bias tape I made. I'm using for my project, and I've got my 6 vinyl strips, cut F, piece F, that are cut ready to go. So I just go ahead and I keep them all together. And what you're going to do, this is one where vinyl and using bias tape gets a little tricky. I'll be honest, I do use my Wonder Clips just to keep it from slipping. The slipping that the vinyl adds just makes me do it. So what we're going to do is you're going to clip your bias tape, however you have your bias tape, to your vinyl like this. And we're going to go to the sewing machine just like we did with the zipper and put a top stitch right along the top edge to give us a nice, we're going to cut that thread. We're going to give us a nice clean edge, and we're going to do that for all 6 strips. Welcome. So today we're going to be making bias tape binding using the Simplicity Bias Tape Maker. There is a link down below. This video is not sponsored. This is just my personal tool that I use here in my sewing studio, and I wanted to give you all a little tips and tricks on how I make it work for me. So I've already got it heated up. I just wanted to show you. It comes with, so you can buy just these pieces and use it with your actual handy dandy iron with your hand iron. But I like this, A, because I have it, and B, it's just, I feel like the other way, I kind of feel like I need a third arm to do it this way because it's running it all together. You'll see how it works. So in this project, we need 3/4 inch bias tape, so that's the attachment that I have put into my maker. So what does that mean? That means we're taking 1.5 inch strips and making bias tape. So to put it into the machine, let me show you. So you corner it. So what I did is I just cut some lengths of fabric, some widths of fabric. This is a fun Tula pink flamingo from her Daydreamer line. I'm making a project keeper for cross stitching. I will link that video if you want to check that out. But this is how you make the bias tape. So you open it up. Okay, so this is hotter than Hades, people. Don't touch it. And of course, if you don't have this, you can use, like I said, I will link them down below where you can just buy these. This is a lot cheaper and it will do the same thing. You're just the iron here at this end versus the machine. So I've got the 3/4 foot on. I've got 1.5 inch pieces of fabric that I have sewn together to give me a nice long line. I got to pull it out just a smidge. Mine seems to get stuck every once in a while. So what we're going to do is you're going to wait. I had it turned on, of course, since I had it opened up. So the green light comes on when it's ready. It gives you, depending on what fabric you're doing, wool, cotton, silk, will depend on how hot the heat pad gets. Obviously, I'm using cotton because I'm making, this is quilt binding. So it is cotton, it's on the highest heat. So now that the green light is on, all I do is press. So I've got it all loaded up. You can see I've got this tab right here because mine gets stuck a little bit, but that's okay. I figured out how to get it to work and I press run. So you can see all it's doing. There's a wheel inside. Now in theory, over here in this box, there's like a spool. I'm not even quite sure what you're supposed to do with that. Wrap it around. It seems kind of silly to me because I'm sitting here, I'm not pulling, I'm just giving enough so when you can hear it, it kind of jams up. See, hear that noise? That means the motor, see, it stops. So I give it just a little bit of a pull and it starts right up again. So I don't take the time to wind my binding around the spool attachments that come with it because I feel like I find that I have to sit here and kind of micromanage it anyway. So why not be the spool here on the left side as well as the right side? So it's just that easy and it pulls right through. And then I'm going to show you. You press run to turn it off. And what does that give us? It gives us a nice bias tape. And so now I'm going to fold that together and use it in my project. Okay, so I have got my 6 bobbin holder strips with their bias tape attached. And now we have to do the legwork to know where to attach them to the cover. So, and remember, this is that zipper. It's just like the zipper binding that we did. I went ahead and I did my 3rd one when I was doing that portion. So if you didn't, you need to go ahead and create one of those. All of that's going to go to the side for right now. But what you need now, we're bringing back the cover. So we've got the cover and I've got it flipped over. This is the inside. I want my front on this side of it because I want my bob. It obviously depends on whether you want bobbin on this side or that side, whichever you want. Totally personal preference. You can switch it around, do what you like. But I'm going to go ahead and put my bobbin again on the left-hand side. No rhyme or reason. That's just what I'm doing. So what we're going to do is you're going to take your quilting ruler and an invisible, so you can use the Frixion pens that disappear in the heat. I don't have one of those handy dandy right this second. So I went and I grabbed one of my Marks Be Gone. It's an invisible, water soluble erasing ink, and so that's going to work for me. So you're going to take your ruler and we're going to have to mark some measurements. This is what's key. So we're going to do it on the left and on the right. So we're going to mark 1 1/4 here, 1 1/4 here, and go ahead and do our line. Now, we don't really need to go all the way across. Right now, we're just going to be using the bobbin portion of it. But just to give me a straight line, I am going to go ahead and do that. So then we need to mark every 2 inches. So I think I should be able to get, so I'm going to 7. I just picked, so 2-inch increments. You want a line on the bobbin side. So again, we didn't need to go all the way across. It's okay. It's water soluble. It'll just, ooh, that one got a little wonky. But you need to mark those every 2 inches. All right. So now that I've got those all marked, what am I going to do with them now? So I'm going to show you. What you're going to do is you're going to take your bobbin, your 6 strips over to the sewing machine, and you're going to do it one at a time. Before you start, you're going to sew a straight, you're just going to sew. What I forgot to mention is during this top stitch portion of the program, I choose to use a longer stitch length. It is functional, yes, but it is also decorative. So usually when I'm stitching, I have a 2.5-inch stitch length. When I'm doing decorative stitches like this, or like what I'm going to be doing here, yes, it's functional. It's going to be holding these bobbin pockets, but it's going to be held on 3 different ends. It doesn't need to be super strong. So I like a prettier stitch length. So I bump mine up to about 3.5. It's a longer stitch length. Personal preference. I just wanted to mention it. So the first thing you're going to do, let me just, so that I don't, that's 9 inches. We're not going to go that far. But the one thing you're going to stitch this one first, because we're going to cover it up and we won't be able to stitch it once it's down. So at the top one, the one that we marked at 1 1/4, put it on your foot. This is what's going to give us the nice quilt feature of the Project Keeper. It's what A, holds the bobbin folder, and B, gives it a nice quilted finish. Now, I went ahead and I did it on this side. It doesn't need to be on this side. There's no bobbin folder. And if you wanted to skip this step because you're doing just zipper pockets, again, skip the step. But this is what makes this unique. This is a factor, a piece of it. It just makes, I love the quilting, the patchwork, the poofiness, especially that the foam gives it, just really steps it up. So what you want to do first is this top line, the line that's at 1 1/4. You want to start here and go to your 9-inch mark that you just made. No rhyme or reason. You just made it there. Start it. Actually, you know what? We're going to go ahead as a way to help you guys. Nope, we're not. So you're going to go all the way to the 9-inch on this one. And then we're going to come back. And what you're going to do, you see this one right here? This is, so you stitch the 9 one. And then you're going to take your first flap and it's going to cover. You will not see those stitches on this side. You'll see them on this side. Gives it the nice uniform, every 2-inch quilted, poofy, beautiful. But you won't see it on this side because this bias tape is covering it up. And that's the magic of these sizes. Remember, these are 2 1/4 strips, but we made 2-inch bobbin lines. And so that's exactly what you need to stuff your DMC bobbin holders in, A, but B, it also hides all the stitch lines on the inside. So it just gives you a nice, clean finish. So what you're going to do is you're going to stitch this line up. And actually, let me go do that and I'll come back and show you what's next. Okay, so you can see that I did a nice 3.5-inch top stitch right along the top. Now, I did not back stitch here because we're going to be continuing this line all the way along because that's the aesthetic I want later on. So we will go over these stitches later. So the back stitch is not needed. Again, you do you. But what you're going to do now is you're going to take your first strip and you're going to line it up right so that it covers those stitch lines, but that it also, see the line that we made at the 2-inch mark is underneath the vinyl. And so we're going to stitch, we're attaching the vinyl now, people. So we're going to stitch right along this blue line, and the vinyl is going to attach to it. And then we're going to come to the next one, and we're going to do the same thing. And the next one, we're going to do the same thing. Again, each time taking into account that we're going to cover the line above it, and the magic and the math will work out perfectly. So everything's going to line up. All right, so remember, we're not going to the edge of the vinyl. How far are we going? We are going to go to the 8.5-inch mark. Now, if you remember, our vinyl strips are 9 inches. We do not want 9 inches. To sewn down, we want 8.5 sewn down. So we're gonna come back here and we're gonna mark 8.5, create a cheat line for us to, like the stop, don't go past that line when you're attaching the vinyl. So you're going to line up your side over here, stitch, 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 but stop here, and you'll see why next. So I've got my 6 flaps all sewn together, just like I said. This bottom stitch is just holding the vinyl. You won't see that stitch, but we've got it all ready to go. I've got my 1/2-inch flap that's not sewn, remember? Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to take our ruler, and again, we're going to mark the 1/2 point to give our cover a nice fold area. So remember, our cover is 20 inches wide. So we're going to mark at the 10-inch point, put a line, go over to the sewing machine, and we're going to run a top stitch right there. While you're over there, you can do this top stitch as well. So this is why you left the 1/2 inch undone. You're taking your little bias folder and you're folding it in there. It's going to slide right in perfect. You see? And now, with this, we can also pin just to keep it closed if you wanted to, but your sewing machine isn't going to grab any of that vinyl, so I'll probably just clip it at the top and the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a top stitch here. Down this one, it's going to grab all the bobbins right here just to hold this flap down, and right here to give my project folder a center fold. We're getting close. Now my bobbin flaps are all held in together by this binding strip. I've got my decorative natural fold ready to go, and I'm starting. You can see the poofy patchwork squares coming together. And now is the time to finish the poofy squares. While we're finishing those squares, we're also going to be creating these 2-inch pockets. What you're going to do is you're going to flip it over to the front side. So we've got our anchor line right here. If you wanted to use a decorative color thread so it was easier to see, it obviously depends on your fabric choice. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to line up this line right here with the 16 on my cutting board. I'm going to want to do, now you see, I want this to be a 2-inch pocket. So there's about 1/8 of an inch that's not in there. So I'm going to smidge over just a smidge on my first line. After that, it's a good 2 inches only. So how you do that, I'm taking my water-soluble marker again. You could take your Fix-On pen, whatever works for you, but I'm lining it up. Instead of doing a 2-inch mark, I'm lining it up at 2 1/8 for this first line, just so I can make sure that the pocket is definitely deep enough to hold a bobbin. That's the whole point of the thing. And so if that pocket doesn't function, we're up a creek. So again, sure would be great if I had a darker marker. Okay, I can see it. So I've got a 2-inch line. And then from then on, I'm just going to go and do another line and 1/3 one. The last one isn't needed because that is going to be closed up with the quilt binding. So I've got the 3 lines. Whew, this is some busy fabric. But then you're going to do the same on the back side. I do want, this is aesthetic. There's no function for this. It just looks pretty. So I am going to go ahead and draw the grids associated to get me this patchwork grid on the back side of my fabric. So we've got our bobbin. I have gone ahead and I've done all the fancy, you can't see it. Maybe you can, but it's certainly there. All the patchwork squares, foamy puff, decorative stitching on the outside of the cover that matches the bobbin side versus the zipper side. You can see it a little bit more, but the bobbin side is now ready to go. All those bobbins fit perfectly in those all those 24 different holders. And then it's time to we're almost ready for the final assembly. So I'm taking this zipper portion, the section 2 that we did earlier, and we're going to go ahead. Remember I mentioned that I cut the vinyl, the dimensions I gave you for the vinyl are a little long, just because that's the one area, depending on how your zipper and the pieces and how all this assembled and got put together, how big of a seam allowance you did and margin, all that stuff. I just didn't want there to be any error. So I gave you a little extra, and you can see that I must have sewn my vinyl kind of at an angle. And that's what happens. Vinyl is tricky to attach. And so up at the top, there's no extra, but down at the bottom, there's about a 1/4 inch extra. So that means somewhere underneath, it got a little catawampus, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut away the extra to line everything up. And now we are good to go. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to take my binder clips and I'm going to clip this because I'm going to do a quick stitch all around, just not all around, at least around this zipper portion, attaching the zipper to the foam cover. So that way, when I do attach the binding, everything, I'm not trying to attach 2 things at once. So I'm going to go run a quick stitch around and come back. So one thing I forgot to mention is to make sure that you go ahead, if you saw from the class when I was just before I went over the sewing machine and did a quick stitch just around this top zipper portion, my zipper, remember, because I use a too long zipper, it was a little extra up here. So you want to make sure you open your zipper just enough because you want it to be on the inside. If your zipper was up, just make sure, it's one of those measure twice, cut once type of situations. Hopefully you don't have to learn that one on the hard way. Okay, everyone, we're almost to the final steps. Our bag is almost ready. So the next thing we're going to do is to make our quilt binding. So per the pattern, I use a 2 1/4 quilt binding. So up in section 1, piece D is your binding at 2 1/4 with binding. Total length needed is a minimum of 75 inches. Longer is better. Shorter doesn't work. So I just wanted to show you guys the tricks. If you're new to binding, I wanted to show you that I do a miter connection to make my long length of binding. You can see I picked a funky fabric It's going to give me this fun ombre color change. That is just so Tula Pink. I love it. But you do a mitered edge here to distribute the connection. So I am going to take this over to my iron. Obviously, I'm going to iron those seams open, and then as you do with binding, I'm going to give it a nice fold in the half seam. So that's the first thing you're going to do. Get your binding ready to put together. We're going to clip the binding, but before we clip the binding, I wanted to show you it's time now. So we've got this. So what I did is, like you can see, I did a little top stitch all around the edge just so it's kind of roughly held together. And then I brought it back and I just did a little cleanup. If there was anything extra, any overage on, kind of square up your piece. If anything got a little catawampus during your assembly, now is the time to clean it up. I did that and it is now ready to go. And so the last thing you want to do is you want to put on your flap before we put on the binding. So again, usually your binding gets, or your flap gets centered. I like to center it in the middle of the project keeper. But because I went for a fussy cutting, it's a little off center, but that's okay. So you're going to just match up on the back side what makes sense. Look at all those loosey-goosey threads. I should get better about cutting threads as I go. But I just, after 20 years of sewing, I just don't. So, but I do want to get these threads out of the way before I line it up. So I line it up and you can see, whew, strong Velcro. Lines up just like that. Look at that fussy cut. Oh my gosh, if I do say so, I'm pretty excited about it. So you want to give it a little bit. I mean, obviously this thing is empty right now. There's no bobbins, no fabric, no, all the accoutrement that's going to go in it is going to take up some space. So, you know, you don't want to just come over and give it a nice flat fold, or once you fill it up and poof it up, it won't work. So I like to give myself a little bit of leeway. And you're going to line it up, kind of figure out where it's going to go. Use whatever tools. I'm using my design table, the lines. I want the edge right here at the 11. So I'm going to open it up. And at the 11 is where this is going to line up. So then I just have to figure out how deep it's going to go. That's perfect. So you're just going to line it up. Make sure, how much extra do I want? So a wraparound seam would mean I would be giving away, cutting off a good inch. I don't want it that tight. So I think I'm going to cut about this much off. That way when it attaches, it's got a little bit of area to get full. There's no, you know, anyway, that's how I do it. I line it up using my 11. Oh, hold on, that's not. Again, fussy cutting is a whole nother, I shouldn't have done this in the pattern, but this is the fabric I wanted to do to show you guys. So I'm going to line this up at the 11. Flip it over. It is lined up. And that's where I'm going to sew. So what I'm going to do on the back side, I'm just going to go over to my sewing machine right now and do a quick top stitch right there. It's going to get all covered up and cleaned up with the binding, but I need to attach it first. So I'm going to do a nice, strong, couple different lines. It's going to get sewn over twice with the binding attachment, but a nice good stitch to attach the flap. And I've got the flap attached, ready to go. Lines up perfect. All right, so now it's time to attach the binding. So like I said, I showed you guys how we're going to assemble and create the binding so it's good to use. Now, if you're a quilter and you've done binding, do it your way. Whatever way works for you. There's 100 different ways on YouTube. Maybe not 100, but there's lots of different ways to do binding. This is the way that works for me, and that's what I'm going to teach you guys. I always start on the bottom. I sew on the inside. This is my machine binding portion of, I've done hand sewing. I do 3 different kinds of binding. This is my machine binding attachment, both the front machine and the back machine. So I want my top stitching of the binding to be on the outside cover. So that means I'm sewing on the inside cover first. So what that means is I'm going to go along. There's extra vinyl. See, the vinyl is, remember how that part I told you about, go around and clean up your edges? There we go. Didn't even know it. So you're going to clean up your edges, and now you're going to start. And so I always start on the bottom, give myself a nice long tail, which is why I always err on the side of extra, just because it's easier to attach the tail with extra. And this is where you're going to clip the bejeebies out of it. So you're going to clip all, like, I probably clip every 2 inches. Now, mitered corners. Let's see if I can zoom, get y'all lined up. Hopefully this angle is going to be a nice, good zoom. Let me get my tweezers. I showed this binding format as well on my love bag project tutorial. So I think at that one, I did it over at the sewing machine. So watch this one here. If it doesn't speak to you, if it's not clicking yet, go watch at least the binding portion of that tutorial. That's a free tutorial under the tutorial playlist on my channel. And I attach the binding the exact same way, just I'm doing it over at the machine versus right here. So we'll see which one works. So the mitered corners, you're going to come to, remember with, if you're new, let me just start off at the beginning. You know, you folded this 2.5 quarter in half, right? And so we've got the nice folded edge and the raw edge. The raw edge is what's getting attached to the perimeter of your project keeper. Step 1. Then you're coming along to the corners, and I do mitered corners. So I do a fold. You're going to stitch, come down and fold. It's a little tricky on the vinyl. The vinyl is slippery. And then you're going to fold again. Hopefully that made sense and I was able to zoom up. Let me do it one more time. You're going to stitch. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam. Stitch, 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 stitch all the way down 1/4 inch. Come down here at the 1/4 inch mark away from the edge of this fabric. You're going to lift your needle up. And at that point, you're going to fold the fabric up and fold the fabric back. This is the origami portion of the program, people. Binding is tricky. It's a fold, sew, fold, sew. It's tricky. So your needle is up, your presser foot is up, and you're going to come back and you're going to needle down right here. This is where you stopped. You're trying to come back basically right where you came out, but after you did the origami on top. Hopefully that makes sense. You're going to clip, clip, clip all around. And so I usually clip aside, so do the corner, clip aside, because, you know, you need to be able to fold and do these things while you go. All right, we're going to start here at the bottom. Again, I use my 1/4 inch and I go into details about what this, if you don't know what this 1/4 inch seam tape is and you don't have this, go and check out. I will link it down below if you want explanations or if you want to show and tell how this is a magical tool that you need on your sewing machine. Again, that is on the love bag tutorial. I show you guys in depth what this is and how this is one of my favorite tools that I use all the time. But I'm using this 1/4 inch guide right here on the tape to make sure that I am 1/4 inch away from the edge. It's a nice, now if you have a perfect 1/4 inch foot, good on you. You don't need it. But I'm using my Juki 2010. That I also link down below. It is my workhorse sewing machine. It does not, I'm not just using the foot that came with it. So it is not a 1/4 inch foot. It's a little scant, even less than a scant. So I use this tape and it's a dream. So anyway, I want to do a nice 1/4 inch all around. So I'm going to start at the edge and I'm going to undo this origami, come down to the corner, do a little back stitch just at the corner, cut my thread. You don't have to cut your thread, but it just makes it easy. Let's see if I can get this up without messing with the camera. And then I'm going to needle down, remember, right back at a 1/4 inch away from the edge. This one doesn't need to take so long. So that's how you do it, folks. 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay, so I did my 1/4 inch on the inside all the way around, attaching the binding. And now we're going to use those clips that we took off as we were sewing around, and we're going to clip again, this time to the front. So we're going to, let me see if I can get y'all a nice, good close-up view. The key is we're going to clip when we're sewing. Okay, so let me see. You can see there's a couple stitch lines. This is where we did a quick little attach the pocket. But this last one that goes around, the one that's approximately a 1/4 inch from the edge, is the one we just sewed. And so what we want to do is we want our flap to come over just a hair, just enough over that line, so that when we stitch it down on this side, using 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the binding, our stitch is not only going to be on the binding on this side, on the front side, because that's the side we can see when we're doing it, but then also when we flip around to the back side, it should be right there on the inside as well. That, I'll be honest with you, is the hardest part to do. Sometimes your interior stitch lines are going to be outside the binding, and that is because you have pulled your binding too taut and you're stitching outside your stitch line. What you want to try to do is stitch, you can't see it. You have to I wish we had x-ray vision, but you can't see it, but you want to stitch just inside that 1/4 inch line that we just created. So the key to x-ray vision, which we don't have, but the key is good pinning, and make sure that you're pinning just over. Now, again, like I said, this is the hardest part. So I pin like it's my job. And I'm going to pin all around, and then I'm going to show you guys how I do it. This is the slowest part. This is the longest. I take my time because this is the seam that you're going to see. The finished product, these stitch lines are going to be seen. Now, for example, I love that this happened. You guys get to see what I'm doing. So when I folded this over taut, even though I have a loose thread, I folded this over. I'm not even getting to my 1/4 inch line. So that means when I stitched around this little edge right here, for whatever reason, my margin was wider than a 1/4 inch. So if I want to clean that up, I'm going to go get my bigger scissors. I'm going to take just a smidge off the top of this so that when I fold over and I clip, I'm where I want to be. So another thing I wanted to come back and show you guys, as I went over and I got the better scissors to show you, there's areas, can you see? Sorry, the lighting is not fantastic, but you can see right here, I don't even know how many layers of fabric that is. What, 10? Because this is where we had that bias zipper fold over. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 8 layers of fabric plus foam. And we're supposed to have enough fold over edge to reach the 1/4 inch. Sometimes it doesn't work. So sometimes that error, that correction is also needed. Like, oh my gosh, look at that. So sometimes I have to make that adjustment on the thicker portions of the project as well. All right, guys, so we are in the last step of the project keeper situation. So I have pinned, I don't even know, or clipped, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 clips all around the perimeter of the project keeper. And so now I'm coming to do the top stitching. So again, I use a nice longer stitch on because it's decorative, it's functional, but it's mostly decorative. Just to hold, it's holding down the flap. So again, I'm going to start in the corner and show you guys. So remember, we've got this seams. Hopefully I'm able to zoom in and show you. We've got these 2 stitch lines, and we got to figure out, well, which is the one we're trying to beat. We're trying to beat the one that's a 1/4 inch away. And so I use these awesome Tula pink tweezers. You could use a stiletto, but I use the tweezers because it kind of helps me fold. The stiletto just holds. Either way, again, use this tool that you got. So we're going to come and I'm going to hold it because I want it to land just to the left of the previous 1/4 inch stitch line. So again, I get the pins out of the way and I kind of hold that point. So I hold that. I know that that is just a hair over. And then I'm going to do my top stitch. I'm going to come around the corner and then I'm going to take it off and show you guys what I do or how it looks. So we're going to come around the corner. Now remember, these mitered corners, we're going to come down to the corner. And we're going to go ahead and create this fold now. And I'm going to hold it with my tweezer stash stiletto. Again, if I had 4 hands, this might be easier. But darn it, I've only got the 2. And I'm trying to show you guys. I didn't mean to press that button. I meant to press the lift button. But we'll come around the corner and you can see that my top stitching on the inside is right where I want it. So it's extra pretty on the outside cover of my portfolio project keeper, but it's all along the line on the inside, which is what I want. Now, obviously I'm using white contrasting thread. If you wanted to have it kind of blend in, feel free to use a thread that matches your binding, but I'm one that always has white thread on my machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sew around the perimeter, going slow and steady and holding and grabbing in slow, steady increments till it's finished. And she's done. The only thing I could do was probably snip 100 threads, but other than that, she is ready to get the next project. So you can see my stitching on the inside is all on the binding. The zipper's ready to go. Stuff your fabric in here, your fancy floss if you only want to use that, your orb catcher, your scissors, anything you need. Your pattern fits right under here. An 8.5 by 11 pattern fits perfect right here. And then you've got your 24 pockets for bobbinated floss ready to go on this side. You fold her up. Again, more threads to cut. But otherwise, you add the flap and she's ready to go. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and it helped you. If you have any questions at all during your process, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask me.